So again, a big welcome to you all and thank you for being here today. And I certainly hope you're enjoying the beginning of the trimester and having a good start to week 2. This week, we will be discussing the assessments and the skills that you need to do those assessments. And in week 1, we mentioned that when you're studying management, that it's a bit more qualitative because it does depend on the situation that you're in or the context, and there are other factors as well, and that this is different to other units that you may be studying, like accounting or business analytics, where there is a method or a formula and that you have to follow that in order to get the correct outcome or result. But when it comes to working out problems and solutions that managers face, there can be more than one best answer, and there can be more than one best approach to addressing the problem. And sometimes that's not always clear cut. And so the basis for today is to try and work out what the right methods are of doing things, the right ways to find evidence, for example, the right ways to try and support your discussion and to set things out in an essay or, in our case, a report. But the answer that each of you have, they might be different, and that will be okay. So it's about understanding what those processes are in this unit to get to a good answer. So really the aim for this week is to provide you with a solid foundation so that you can build your skills of finding and then using the source information, and then using that source information to communicate your ideas and points in a much more effective and clear-cut way in your assessments. So before we proceed too much further, similar to last week, we'll do an acknowledgement of country. And what we're looking at here is the Australian Indonesian Youth Association's acknowledgement of country. And each week we'll show how different organisations recognise the Indigenous people of Australia and also the Torres Strait Islanders, because again, this is what companies and organisations are doing now, and it's also a really important part of management to recognise those first people, and also to recognise the diversity that we have within the community and within organisations. So I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land. I pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the memories, the traditions and the culture of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across the nation. So looking now at what we're doing in this session, there are 3 main areas, and they're all about skills, as you can see here. So first of all, the graduate learning outcomes for this unit, and we focus on 4, and there are 8 in total across the university. So by the time you finish your degree, you will have had experience and been assessed on all of those 8 GLOWs. But in this unit, as I said, we're only focusing on these 4. The second thing we'll look at today, and this is perhaps the most important thing, are the skills that you need for your assessments in MMM132. And of course, you'll recognise by looking at that list of skills that they're valuable not only in this unit, but they will flow over to many of your other units that you'll be studying at university as well. So, so it's a really good foundation to learn these skills, because not only do you get marks for demonstrating your ability to use them, but you may also potentially lose marks if you don't show an appropriate demonstration of those skills in the assessments. And on the right there, finally, we'll look at the resources that you can access to help you. And we see these as a toolkit to help you to do management in particular. And as I said before, we need different skills because we need to understand different things. And that leads to helping us to make better management decisions, and our decisions are based on research. So we regard these as our toolkit, and the resources are located in the unit site on CloudDeacon, but also in the university more broadly. So let's now have a look at this, and you may remember we looked at this last week, and these are the weekly topics, and how the assessment corresponds to the topics, and the blue part there, these are highlighted the skills in relation to those assessments. And I'm sure you've had a chance to have a look at the unit site over week 1 and look at the 10 topics. So I won't go through those individually now. And you may be aware too that in our trimester, we actually have 11 weeks, and that last week is a review and preparation for our end of unit assessment. Now, last week I referred to this as our exam, where we have changed the terminology, and that I'm adjusting. So technically it's not an exam, although it is in the exam period at the end of the trimester, but we'll call it the end of unit assessment. So I apologise for any confusion about that reference there last week. So in terms of in week 11, just returning to week 11 there, it is the lecture will be a review of the examinable topics and preparation for that end of unit assessment. There you go, I just mixed up the words again. And in your seminars, if you're an on-campus student, you'll be doing your team presentation. And in the online seminar, it will again be a review and end of unit assessment preparation there. Now, the first assessment, as you know, is in 2 parts, and part 1 is due in week 5. And that includes what we call the preparation tasks. And these tasks have a really strong focus on those foundation skills. And that will provide you with a good basis to help you complete the longer business report, assignment 1.2, that's due in week 8. And you'll get feedback on your skills so that you can make improvements and hopefully get a better outcome for that longer business report. Assignment 2, as you can see here, is the team presentation, teams of 5 people. And that will assess you on your knowledge about not only the management theory, because that will be the content focus, but you'll also be assessed on your learning and skills in relation to your teamwork. And you will be completing a team presentation. So on-campus students will be in this week 11 seminar, and online students will do that via Zoom or other formats like that. Okay, so that's just a bit of an overview there of the assessment and the link to the topics that we're covering. Now, here, returning to the GLOW skills covered in the unit, and the first key skill that we're covering in MMM132 is communication skills. And you can see on the left there in the yellow box, the breakdown of what all the different aspects of what communication means. And it does encompass quite a lot of different elements that over in your coursework you'll be developing. So these include, firstly, oral communication, and so that includes elements of having an awareness of your audience by showing empathy, engagement with your audience, and being able to respond to questions appropriately. Also using the right tone of voice, depending on your purpose and situation, maintaining eye contact, and so on. With the written communication side of things, you'll be looking at different forms of writing, so reports and essays, reflective writing, also using a structured argument to present ideas and in a coherent and cohesive way. And in this unit, we will look at how you do that using the DEAR method. So can you define, explain, analyse, relate concepts and examples in a structured way? And have you, are those ideas presented with supporting evidence and referencing, and we use APA 7. So following those sorts of conventions will show your understanding of those requirements there. And also we've got the interpersonal communication, so communication with other people. And this is about, in some ways, having emotional intelligence to be able to engage with others. Again, being sensitive to your audience, and that includes your non-verbal communication, and also showing active listening when others are communicating to you. So again, these are all the kinds of skills that we want you to develop, and the university wants you to develop over the course, not only of this unit, but in all of your units throughout your degree. And we will be focusing on elements of these in your assessments, and that will be made clear today, I hope. And on the right there, you may also be familiar with the Business and Law Skills Toolkit, and they have a communication toolkit as well. And what's interesting about the toolkit is that this has been prepared by other business and law students. So they know from their experience what is relevant to students and what would help students. And so, so this one is highlighting communication skills, and in yellow there you can see the relevant parts that apply, that would be useful for MMM 132. But there are other toolkits too that you might want to take note of, like it for your other units. So there's toolkits on maths and using Excel and statistics. There's also a legal skills toolkit too. So again, these have all been prepared by other students to help with your learning. Another skill that's relevant to our unit is critical thinking. So this is another glow that we focus on. Now, when we think of critical thinking, and again, you might be familiar with this, and you'll know that it's quite a much more difficult skill to develop, because it does require a very good and thorough understanding of what it is that you're reading or trying to communicate. But increasingly, it's a really important skill to develop. And so what is it? It is about being able to evaluate information using critical and analytical thinking, and also having some judgment. So really, how to think critically, it's really about questioning the information that you've been given. So thinking about, the information presented, what's the basis of this? Is it right? Are there some limitations? Are there some omissions? How credible is this? Could it be fake? What's the author's agenda? Those sorts of questioning can provide you with a bit of a better and more insightful understanding about what's being presented. Does the author have an agenda? Are they presenting with a bias in terms of, a particular perspective, rather than perhaps a more well-rounded, well-balanced perspective? So again, this is really about looking at the information, questioning it, and making sure that the information that you're getting is valuable, that it's relevant to what you're doing, to your purpose, and then making a judgment about that. So it is another thing to note here. It is a skill that you will develop over time, and once you've got that skill, you can take it with you anywhere. And that's what we mean by a transferable skill. Once you've got it, you can apply it in different contexts, in different situations, in multiple units. So it's not just relevant to this unit, it can be used across other parts of your life and in other disciplines. So it is about, as we mentioned there, analysing problems, identifying important factors and variables, and evaluating that information and presenting a judgment of whether how important it is, and the impact of other factors there. So there are different ways of doing critical thinking. So on the right there is just a bit of a checklist of strategies that you might implement there to help you with this skill. So reflecting on the information, as we mentioned there, questioning it, providing a context, so looking at it from the situation and how it might be applied, evaluating it, making a judgment or assessment about its worth or merit, and including some analysis, seeing the different parts and how they fit together, how they work, and maybe seeing how it works in practice, observing it in different examples or applications. So it is a really important skill, and as I mentioned, it is a very difficult one, but it is one that we're going to encourage you to start to develop and think about in terms of management and how managers operate, and the importance of managers to always check the information that they're receiving, because they make their decisions on that information, so it does need to be sound and credible. Now, another skill, another important skill to develop during your studies is teamwork. And teamwork, by definition, is working and learning with others who are different to ourselves. Now, think about all of us here gathered today. We are all different and we're not all the same. And some of you might be aiming for very high marks in MMM132, and some of you might be aiming just for a pass, and both are okay. And the key here is to try and understand yourself, and then in turn you can try and understand the needs of others, especially when you're working with them. And this teamwork skill will be experienced as a topic in itself in a future week. So we'll be looking at some of the theory concepts in relating to what effective teams do and so on, and some of the stages of team development. And you'll also be assessed on your teamwork in your assignment 2 presentation. Now, teamwork, we know it's really important, and but we also know, maybe from past experience, that working with others is not always easy, and in fact it can be very challenging. But again, no one is perfect, and so the key to teamwork really is about trying to find a way to work with others, perhaps not being overly critical of others because they are different, and there are differences in perhaps outlook or work ethic or communication styles, for example, but also recognising and respecting that diversity is an important element to effective teamwork. And look around the workplace, nearly all jobs require us to work with others, so it is a really important skill to develop for your lifelong learning and problem solving, to try and develop the way that you understand others, and to harness that the strengths that diversity can bring. Now, in the box there on the left, this has a bit of a checklist of what some of the attributes that successful teams have in common. So, and this might be something that you keep in mind when you're working together with other members later in the trimester. So, of course, being able to manage your time is really important. And perhaps one of the first things you'll do in your team is to work out when you have common time to meet, and then, of course, to turn up to those meetings. And many of you have other commitments in your life and might be working, or perhaps in the case of online students, you might be in different time zones. But part of the assessment is finding a way to manage your time to make the team work. Sometimes teams like to make a contract and to really explicitly outline how they're going to achieve tasks and the time frame perhaps to achieve those tasks to work together. We also know through the theory that teams go through different developmental stages. They storm, norm, perform and adjourn. And again, we'll be talking more about that process later in a future topic. We also know that successful teams use complementary skills. So this is where they harness those differences in team members to all work together on their shared goal to get a better outcome. So again, the team members don't all have to be doing the same thing, but they need to be working together to produce that great result. Electing a leader of the team can be another strength, and the role of the leader, might be different in different teams. And a leader doesn't have to do all of the work, and it doesn't mean that they're necessarily an expert in a particular area. But usually this person is really good at keeping people together, making sure that people are working, are staying on task and keeping on time and are motivated, so that progress can be made there. So basically, these are all the things that you'll need to learn in your teamwork, and I'm sure many of you know a lot about this already, but it is something we will work on and develop. And again, too, another reminder about the teamwork skills in the Business and Laws Skills Toolkit. So looking now at the more of a focus on the skills needed for your first assignment, assignment 1.1. And so remember, this is due in week 5. So assignment 1.1 is not a report. It is, it consists of 3 tasks, okay? And the rationale behind this first assignment is to prepare you for that longer assignment 1.2, which is your business report. So because it is a preparation assignment, it does focus on those key skills, so researching, writing, citing, and referencing. And if this is your first unit, these skills might be new to you. And really that's why we are including them and asking you to show them in this assessment. So if we go through the tasks now and make things a bit clearer. So the first task there, it's a 500-word mini essay, and you might break that up into 2 or 3 or 4 short paragraphs. And with that 500 words, there's no plus or minus 10%. So that is that word limit. So you will need to write concisely, and that may be a bit of a challenge. You should use in your essay the DEAR format. So in your essay, an essay format, it will have an introduction, it will have a body and a conclusion, and your essay will have definitions and explanations of the theory concepts. And it will also then apply those concepts to your chosen organisation. So you'll provide a little bit of context, you'll provide some analysis showing how it works, and that critical evaluation of how your organisation has, responded to that theory. So this is the kind of thinking, if you like, that we want you to show your knowledge and understanding of the theory concepts and the examples. Now, you also, as part of this task, you've got to find some information, and the first source that you'll use is the textbook. So the textbook you'll be familiar with is Principles of Management. It's free and online, and we want you to cite from that particular textbook, particularly the definitions of the theory concepts. Now, we also want you to expand your research to find information from a relevant management peer-reviewed academic journal article. So perhaps if this is new to you, the first step might be to understand what is an academic journal article, and to then be able to find them in the library databases. Now, the library has made a start on your research, and you can find you can choose to use those sources, but you can also find your own sources, and the link to that is in the week 2 folder on Cloud Deacon. So we also, in addition to the textbook and an academic journal article, you'll need to find some information from a reputable source about your selected organisation. So that could be the company website, most likely, but it could also be from an Australian newspaper or a business magazine or an industry report. And so once you're putting that information together, again, on selecting the sources, your selection of that information, you'll need to think about how relevant that source is, how suitable it is, how reliable it is. And that selection is part of your critical thinking too. And so thinking about the purpose and those sources and how they relate is part of that skill that you'll be assessed on. And then when you're putting your writing together, you'll need to show that you can use that source information to support your points in your mini essay. And so some of the writing skills that we'll be asking you to demonstrate is to include a direct quote. So a direct quote, and I'll show you some examples a bit further, bit later, sorry. This is where you're taking the exact words of another author and you're putting them into double quotation marks. And because they're not your words, you'll include a citation to reference the source. In addition, you'll need to paraphrase, and this is where you take the ideas of another author and you use your own words and sentence structure and writing style to convey that idea. And again, you'll need to include an in-text citation. So both of those writing skills will need to be included in your 500 words. So it's a bit of a checklist, if you like. And in terms of referencing, so we use the APA 7 style, and there are a number of different referencing styles, but APA 7 is the style that we use in business. And this requires in-text citations and a reference list. So in assignment 1.1, you're asked to do 2 reference lists. So you'll have a reference list for the sources you've used in your 500-word essay, and you'll also have a reference list for the sources you plan to use in your assignment 1.2. So task 3 is where you'll have your second reference list. So this is, so you'll need to refer to the 1.2 business report instructions to see what's needed there, okay? Now, you don't need to read them, you don't need to summarize those sources at the moment, and when you come to writing the report, you might even use different sources. But what we're looking at in assignment 1.1 is the skills. Can you find relevant sources, and can you format those sources in APA 7? Okay, so that's what you'll be showing there. And then going back to task 2, this is where, again, you'll be looking ahead to your assignment 1.2 business report, and you'll be writing a draft table of contents. So this is like a plan for how you will structure your business report. And again, when you go to write your report, you might make some changes based on the feedback you get for 1.1, and that will be okay. 1.1 and 1.2 are separate submissions. They're most likely going to be marked by different markers, and we don't compare them. So it is okay to make some changes there. All right, so that's a bit of an overview of the skills needed in assignment 1.1. Let's now have a look at the instructions so that you can see what we mean in a little bit more detail. So, and remember, the instructions and other resources can be found on Clouddeacon in the assessments tile. So looking at task 1, and here we'll focus on the content side of things. And you can see that, I'm just checking I was recording. In task 1, you're required to briefly summarise the components of an organisation's competing values framework, and then to identify this in your selected organisation. So you can choose AGL or Transurban. So one of those 2 organisations, but not both, okay, or any other. And so you're looking at that framework in your organisation, and then you're evaluating how well this positioning aligns with the 2023 external environment. So, again, with the organisations, touching on those, you can, again, just choose either AGL or Transurban. And as long as you just choose one, and keep in mind too, if you decide to change companies for assignment 1.2, that will be fine, because as I said, we don't compare assignments, they're separate submissions, and that will be okay. But ideally, because you've done some research and reading about that company, ideally you would stay with the same organisation. There's no need to contact the organisation because we've provided enough resources there to complete this assessment. And that's really not the key to doing this work. In terms of starting your research, you've got the link there to the relevant section in the textbook. So chapter 4, learning outcome 5. And this is a good place to start to get your definitions. And then from there, you might expand to go to a journal article that talks about the theory as it applies to organisations in general, because it's unlikely that a journal article will focus on AGL or Transurban. So when you're looking at the journal articles, you're really most likely looking at the theory, as I said, as it applies to organisations in general, and why it's important for them to be aware of, and perhaps what might happen if they're not aware. Now, in terms of your organisation, then again, you need some supporting information. So source information when discussing your organisation will come from the organisation, maybe their website, most likely their website, but also perhaps in the media or a news article or some sort of industry report there. So you can see underneath in task 1 with the dot points, you can see that the list of requirements, and you can use that like a checklist to help with meeting that criteria there. And you can see here in task A 1.1.2, so task 2, this is the draft table of contents, and task 3 there is a draft reference list. So task 2 and task 3, they are your plans for the business report. And again, this is a lot of information, but over the next few weeks in the seminars, and this is why it's worthwhile attending the seminars, we'll be covering not only the discipline information, so the theories and understanding that, but also the skills and going through these instructions in a bit more details and answering any questions that you might have. So looking now at the resources available to help you complete this assignment, there's support at the university level, and you can go to the library and get assistance using the databases and using different search terms, for example, to help with your research skills. There's also the study support advisors and their various online resources that can help you with your academic writing skills and also the referencing skills. And there's also IT support there too. So if you need any assistance with technical help, IT issues, and as Deakin students, you are hopefully aware that you can get a lot of free software such as Office 365 and MS Teams. So if you're not aware of that, then that's something that they might be able to assist you with. Also here in the unit, there's a lot of support and resources. You can ask your tutor. You can also ask the unit chair for help, and also you can, there we go, a pop-up just came up. There's a topic each, and there's also, it's a good idea to have a look at the weekly announcements. So they'll be posted at the start of each week, and that's a good sort of guide to what's happening in that week, and that provides a lot of links and information and so on there, and resources. In the topic, weekly topic folders, there's the 2 tabs. There's the required tab that has the lecture and seminar information, and there's also the recommended tab, and that has a lot of the links to the library resources and also study support resources. So in week 2, there's a lot of information and videos from those support services it's a good place to have a look at. And of course, the discussion forums. If you've got any questions, there's designated discussion forums for the assessment, and of course the seminar and lecture recordings, which I'm sure you're aware of. So, and also the textbook and other students are a great resource too, and that includes the toolkit, which I mentioned, and student mentors. There's also, of course, the online tools such as Turnitin and Smart Thinking, and you can submit your drafts to these links, and you can get some feedback about your work. So Turnitin checks the similarity of how you've used sources, and it checks your work against other sources. So if your work has been highly similar, when it comes to be assessed, then the unit chair might try and understand why there is that high similarity, and there may be perhaps some consequences to that high similarity. So ideally, before you submit, you want to check your draft and so that you can learn and improve on some of these writing skills that we've been talking about in today's class. Smart thinking is another tool that you can use, and you submit your assignments, your drafts through Smart Thinking, and it takes about 24 to 48 hours for them to review it, and they'll come back and give you some advice on areas that you might work on before you submit. Yeah, let us know how you find those tools. And also relevant this week is, as I mentioned, to develop some of those library skills. And Sharon Chua, who is our librarian and is monitoring our library discussion forum, where you can ask your research questions. And there's also, in that discussion forum, there's also links to the textbook and links to resources to get you started on your assignment. And those links are also found in the Week 2 recommended tab. But Sharon, as you can see here, will be doing a presentation on Zoom on Thursday, and she will record this session and share with you her presentation slides. If you're unable to make it, the link is in the library discussion page, and it's also on the homepage in this week's weekly announcement. And so again, we are all different. Some of you may have more experience than others navigating and using the library, but for some of us, these may be new skills, especially if you're a first-year student and this is your first unit. So these resources, again, are for you to use as needed. The link for Smart Thinking is in the Study Skills discussion forum on the unit site. That's a good, direct way to find it on the unit site there. Now, we've got a bit of a cloud site scavenger hunt, so you can use your microphone or you can use the chat box. And this is just to make sure that you're able to find information around our site. As I said, there's a lot of information. Being able to find it when you need it is key to being effective and efficient with your time. So everyone, are you able to find the class PowerPoints? Where might they be? Again, feel free to use the microphone or to use the chat box.
Week 1, under week 2 lecture and seminar resources, they have like the recordings and slides and everything there.
Perfect. Excellent. Thanks so much. And so again, and there may be some additional resources there too, particularly in relation to the seminars. And what about number 2? What do all extensions require? Matthew's on it, a medical certificate. Yes, that might be something that you may need. And again, it depends on the situation.
You may have a plan in place, which means it automatically goes through.
Fantastic. Yes, that's right. So that is something that to take advantage of if that applies to you, certainly. And the unit chair will be aware of that. So the point is that applying for an extension, you will need some supporting evidence, and a valid reason, again, could be a medical certificate, or it could be a police report and or an insurance report sometimes. But in the main, it's those documents that help support your claim and make it fair for everybody. And you can, let's see, where do you fill in the extension form? How do you do that? Does anyone know? Yes, on Cloud Deacon. So in the there is a link, and you complete that form, and that goes to the unit chair, and you can attach your documents there. So it's important that you, if this does apply to you, that you do that before the due date, so that you're not penalised. And there's another policy and procedure if you apply after the due date has passed, and that's called applying for a special consideration. So that's a different set of rules. Under the assessments tab, great, thanks so much. Students helping other students, that's the best way. And we're up to number 3 in the chat box. You're all onto that. You've got the dates there, fantastic. Tuesday, the 8th of August, week 5, 8 p.m. That's right, and there is a little bit of leeway after that. So, but yeah, do aim to try and submit on time to avoid any penalties. And you've got until, and the university won't penalise you if it's submitted before midnight, but it must be in by that due date. Otherwise, you will get a penalty, and it's 5% per day late, up to 7 days. And if it's submitted after 7 days, it just won't be marked. So do try and make sure you do that. And number 4 in the assessment due box under the assessment tabs, yep, the drop box rather. And number 5, we talked about that. Okay, I think I jumped around the questions there. Okay, is anyone, that's all clear to anyone? So we've got that. So getting an assignment extension before the due date, special consideration after the due date, up to, so something to be mindful of, those rules and procedures. And again, we have to be fair to everybody because we have about 940 students in the unit. And if any of this is unclear, post a question to the discussion forum, and that way other people can benefit to the answers that are given there too. All right, thanks everyone. Moving on, this is another concept. Again, you don't need to remember this necessarily, but it just provides a little bit of context for what we're talking about today, certainly in terms of demonstrating your understanding of information. And it's called Bloom's taxonomy. And this is a theory about learning, knowledge and understanding. And really it's a way that the markers in the unit use and have in their sort of background in their minds when they're looking at your assessments. So if we start at the bottom there, again, students, maybe especially when they're sitting exams, they'll try and just remember everything. So being able to recognise facts and recall facts, we say that's the beginning level of your understanding. So you remember a theory, and then you can perhaps show your understanding and move up that hierarchy by explaining what it means. So perhaps putting it in your own words and describing it in away from the exact words that's in the textbook. So paraphrasing it in other words. And you might then move up to the next level and show a deeper understanding if you're then able to apply that theory to all those rules, all those facts to different situations or different examples. So as you saw in the assignment instructions, we're asking you to define and explain the theory concepts and then to apply that theory to your selected organisation, either AGL or Transurban. So can you see how it works? Can you see the impact that it has had on the way that AGL or Transurban operate? And then can you provide some analysis, see the different parts, see how they join together, how they connect, and how they are effective or perhaps not so effective. And that's where we're starting to move towards the evaluation side of things, which is a much more difficult skill at the top of that pyramid. So being able to evaluate the information shows a really deep understanding because you're making a judgment about how well they're dealing with it, how effective they are, or the extent of that theory impact on their operations. Now, right at the top of this taxonomy is creation, and certainly we're not requiring you to do that. That's going a little bit beyond what we ask you to do. So, and that might include perhaps making a recommendation. So we're not asking you to do that, but we're really asking you to show your understanding of some knowledge of the information, to understand it, to be able to apply it, to analyse how it works, to then provide some evaluations through some critical thinking and judgment, and to show these different levels of understanding there. So right up to the top, which is ideally the yellow one. So again, these are different ways to approach your studies in this unit. And again, we're all different. Some of you might just want to pass and get through, but others might be aiming for those higher levels. We don't judge, but part of your planning moving forward is to perhaps work out, what you need to do and within the resources that you have. And this leads us to trying to crack the DEAR code, if you like. And what we mean by this is that you'll find in every discipline, whether it's law or business analytics or accounting, it has a different way of thinking or a code, if you like. So in, economists, they think differently and rely on different forms of evidence. Like lawyers, they're looking at something different as well. And so in management, we also have a code and we use the DEAR code. So this is, again, trying to help us understand how we think and study management. So we want you to try and, first of all, as I mentioned there, define the management theory and concepts. And those concepts are from the textbook. And then to be able to explain those theories in your own words, again, using the textbook, but also perhaps from the journal articles you might read. Because again, if you're able to explain those concepts, then you're showing a better and deeper understanding of what they mean. And then from there, you'll need to analyse and evaluate the theories. How do they work? What are the different components and what are the factors that might impact their effectiveness? And then to use your knowledge and reasoning to then relate and evaluate them to the organisations in the real world. So AGL or Transurban. So how do those theories work in practice? And in this unit as well, we're looking at some of those technical skills, and to help you with that, there's a link to reading and note taking from that source information there to help. All right, so moving on, looking at the time, this is a breakdown of how you can put together all of those different components. And this is a bit of a snapshot or a summary, if you like, of what's needed in your mini essay in task 1. So first of all, you need to focus on the theory from your textbook, and the link is provided in the instructions. We also want you to research some theory as it could apply to organisations in general from academic journal articles. And again, the library link and sources will help you to find relevant information there. We also want you to get information about your chosen organisation. As we said, this can be from the website or media articles and other credible sources like industry reports or annual reports. And we want you to learn some citing and referencing skills using APA 7. And you can get help and advice on this through our seminars in MMM 132, but also through Deakin Study support. Being aware of the formats for assignment 1. So remember, assignment 1.1 is not a report. It is just those 3 separate tasks. And assignment 1.2 due in week 8 does require a report with specific section headings and so on, and it will look different. So being aware of those requirements is important, and that will affect your presentation. Looking at the rubric is very important to see where the marks are allocated, and you can use that as a checklist to make sure your submissions are complete. And also using that DEAR mini essay structure where possible. So as we mentioned, defining the theory from your textbook, explaining them in your own words and having support from the text and journal resources, paraphrasing, including direct quotes, providing some analysis and evaluation, and using your knowledge and reasoning and relate them to the organisation in the real world. Now, just to show you what this might look like, we've got a sample here, and the different colours highlight the different requirements in your mini essay. So we've got in red, there's a couple of statements from the textbook. In this instance, it's about social responsibility, and it's from an old textbook that we no longer use. And then following that in the purple, there's some further explanation of that definition with support from a journal article. So that is Carolyn Shabana. Then in the green, so that first paragraph is talking about those concepts in general as they apply to organisations. And then in the second paragraph in green, this is focusing on the specific organisation. In this case, it is Transurban, but it's again a slightly different focus on and what you're required to discuss. So, so this is looking at the company and using the information from the company website to support that discussion. And you can see in blue there, they're the in-text citations that reference those sources in APA 7. So that's just a bit of a visual illustration, if you like, of those different requirements and putting them all together in task 1. In task 2, you are required to have a draft table of contents. So this is looking ahead to your assignment 1.2, and this is again another visual of how you might put that together, what it might look like. So obviously some of the headings will be similar, but other headings will be different because this is a table of contents that relates to a previous assignment. So you'll need to look at our current assignment task words to see what are the headings you will need to include. So, but generally you'll see that it's got a heading for the introduction and then those section headings that relate to the 3 tasks in the body of the report. And there's a conclusion and a reference list. There's no executive summary because that comes before the introduction in the report, so you don't need to include it here. And you'll see in it has some page numbers, and when you go to do your draft table of contents, you wouldn't have written your report, so you won't know what those page numbers are, but it's a good idea to put them in just to signal to the marker that you know that and are aware that the format for a table of contents is to include page numbers. So in terms of how to research and find information, so your library skills, there's a little bit of information here. As we've mentioned, starting with the textbook to get those key concepts is the first step. And then check the MMM132 library link that's in the week 2 folder, because as I mentioned, Sharon has already done quite a bit of work finding sources that are useful to assignment 1. And that's a great starting point, particularly if you're a little bit unsure about using the library. And of course, you can always supplement that and use other sources that you've found yourself. You can also search the library and Google Scholar. If you're using Google Scholar, there's an option to tick Deakin University, and Sharon will show you how to do that in her presentation. But remember, you should never have to pay for sources. So if you find something in Google Scholar, then go back to Deakin Library, because you might avoid that paywall. So, but Sharon will give you some tips in her presentation this week. So find a relevant peer-reviewed management academic journal article. And these are really important because they are peer-reviewed, which means that other experts have checked the information and can validate it. So the more information you use from these sources, the more solid and persuasive your discussion will be, because it does have that support. You'll also need to use, as I mentioned, regular non-academic sources. And so, for example, if you know someone who works at Transurban, you wouldn't use them as a source in your essay. Instead, you'd go to the organisational website, because that's far more credible and rigorous than what's an anecdote that you've heard. So remember, the library presentation is this week. If you can't attend live, do catch up on the recording there. Now, I'm aware I'm just a little bit over time, so I do apologise. I've just got a few more things to run through, and so again, if you do need to leave earlier, that is fine. To find the link to the library presentation, if you go to the library discussion folder on the MMM132, that's one place, and the other place is on the home page of MMM132 in this week's news item from Wendy. She'll have the link to that source there, and we'll also post a recording of it. Now, just quickly, a little bit about ChatGPT, and so this is something that's relatively new, and it is improving a lot, and it is something that is a great tool in many ways, but in other ways that it has some limitations. So being aware of the pros and cons is, again, being a critical thinker and being effective at being a more effective student. So so Deakin acknowledges the use of ChatGPT, but they are concerned that students may use it as a form of cheating, or maybe they will use it and not acknowledge it. So there are some systems in place to make sure that it is being used appropriately. And again, we'll be doing some activities in relation to this in our week 3 seminar, just to see how it works and to discuss some of those implications. You can see here, again, some of the limitations of ChatGPT, and you may be aware of these yourself. Oops, sorry, everybody. So first of all, it doesn't, again, if it doesn't have the information, it may make it up. And often the information is not current, and because it is using information pre-2021, so it might give you a bit of false confidence that what it is presenting is true and accurate. And remember, it's using information about a particular topic that's may have been, generated by one particular group, and they're presenting it without any sort of objectivity or any examination about perhaps the potential bias of that information from a particular group. So it can be inaccurate, and these are some things to be aware of. So it is a tool, but you need to be mindful of how you use it, and again, some of the limitations that it can present. So always refer to other sources and not just rely only on this source because of these shortfalls. If you do use it in your assessments, you do not need to cite it in text, but you will need to include it in your reference list. And there's some, if you have a look at the Deakin Guide to APA 7, there's some information there about how to do that. And again, in exams, the university does not want you to use this, so a little bit of a warning about using it carefully, using it depending on different situations, to be mindful of what's accepted and what's not. Also, if you are using it, do not share personal information, because again, it's accessible worldwide, and you've got to be careful there. And the key message, though, is that it shouldn't replace your own thinking, your own analysis of the information. So it is one tool, but it's one tool of many, and that's something to be mindful of. So use it in conjunction with other sources, and be aware of and follow the university's academic integrity policy, so you don't fall foul of those requirements. Some other sources to help you on campus and online. So highlighted in yellow are all the different sources and resources that are here that can help you to be a more effective student, and perhaps you're familiar with them. There's the language and learning advisors. You can book an appointment with them. There's also the Deakin Guide to Referencing, which we'll be referring to. Bookmark that page. There's also student mentors, writing mentors, maths mentors, and so on. There are past leaders, but we don't have one in our unit. There's online tutoring and writing feedback. We talked about Smart Thinking and Turnitin as well. So there's a lot of resources, and in these early weeks, it's a really good idea to become familiar with them. I mentioned there help from other students, and you might participate yourself in the Student Peer Mentor Program, and also a little bit now about APA 7 citing and referencing. And so again, we'll be looking at some practical activities in the seminars, and some of you may be more familiar than other people, but in business we use APA 7, and there are other, if you're doing law, you'll use another referencing style. In the week 2 folder, there is a video by Nara, our study support advisor, and on how to reference and using these source informations. And it is something to be mindful of, because you will be assessed in how well you demonstrate this skill in your assignments, and it's also covered in the end of unit assessment. But you can get help from study support with this important skill. So this is just the Deakin APA 7 guide document. It's a PDF, but they also have the website. And with all this, with referencing, it can be a little bit overwhelming if you are new to it, but keep in mind that you don't need to memorize these skills. As long as you've got this guide handy, then it's useful. The other thing too, there are some online generator tools that can also save you some time with your referencing. And but always go back to the Deakin guide just to check that it does meet the Deakin requirements, because there can be some differences and variations depending on what generator tool you use. So that's something to keep in mind there too. In terms of referencing skills, there are 3 ways to cite your source information, and it depends on how you're using the information from your sources. So if you're summarizing, you'd include a general reference, and this has in the citation the author and date. So there's no need to include a page number if you're summarizing a long passage of text that covers many pages. The second way to cite is a paraphrase. So this is where you're taking an idea of another author and you're rewriting it in your own words and writing style. And the citation, because a paraphrase refers to a specific passage of text, most usually 40 words or less, you are recommended to include the page number in the citation. So in this citation, in this example, the citation's at the beginning of the sentence, and this the focus in this sentence would be on the source or the author. Another way to use source information in your writing is to include a direct quote. So this is where you're using the exact words from another author or source, and you need to include the page number. And so there are other ways, if you're using longer quotes, and it's generally not required for our assignments, so quotes should be 40 words or less, and you use double quotation marks. And again, author, year, and page number. And the Deakin guide, again, shows you further examples and explanations there, and we'll be doing some practice activities. So there, what I just showed you were the in-text citations. So this is how you reference, that was how you reference your sources in your mini essay. And then you would have the complete list of the sources you've cited in your reference list. And remember, in assignment 1.1, you need 2 reference lists, one for task 1 and your draft reference list in task 3. So the main rules for a reference list, and there are a lot of rules, so I won't go through all of them now, but just keep in mind you don't need to remember them, but the main ones are that it is a list of all the sources that you've cited in your work, 1 listing per work, and this contains the key ideas there. And in terms of what information you include in the reference, and again, depending on the type of source, the format may vary. So that's where you go back to the Deakin guide and just check what the formatting requirements are for that particular source. And then when you're putting it all together in your reference list, you have your heading at the top. You will arrange those sources in alphabetical order without numbers or bullet points. And you'll use what's called the hanging indent paragraph style and double spacing. So the reference Deakin APA guide has a sample reference list, again, as a visual, just to get a bit of an idea of how to present that source information. But in the seminars over the next few weeks, we'll be providing some practice to help you with that important skill. And so just a reminder, as we're wrapping up today's class, of the Business and Law Student Skills Toolkit, which has a lot of the key skills that we will be focusing on in our unit, MMM 132. So highlighted in yellow there, you can see the communication skills and the teamwork skills, but there are other skills that might be relevant to your other units. And so that brings me to the end. Again, I apologise for going over time, and so I appreciate those people who were able to stay to the end. And if you missed, if you're listening to the recording, so well done to you. So going forward, continue to attend your seminars, as we'll be doing some work on assignment 1.1 this week. We'll also be looking at APA 7, so you might check out that site, and also recommend that you skim read the textbook just to become familiar with some of those concepts that you might be using in your assignment. Remember the library presentation this week, and if you can't attend, it will be recorded. Enjoy week 2, everybody. I'm going to stop the recording now, and let me know if you have any questions, but otherwise have a great day, and see you next time. Bye for now.
When is the library recording?
The presentation will be held on Thursday, and so soon after that presentation is finished, then the librarian will upload the recording, most likely to the library discussion page, but we will post it in other places on the unit site, so you can access it in a number of different ways. So most likely on the homepage, in the news item, and maybe even in the week 2 resources folder too. We'll let you know.
What time is it on Thursday? I'm sorry.